Hello, everyone. Welcome to all the attendees who are tuning in from wherever. Thank you for joining us this lovely Saturday afternoon for this wonderful event. So I'm going to start by introducing myself. My name is Cynthia Okoye. I am a PhD student at the University of Cambridge, and I am co-president of the African Society of Cambridge. So this program is put together by the African Society of Cambridge University in partnership with Africa of Our Dream Initiative. And to just tell you a little bit more about, the bigger program behind this webinar. So it's called the Ask School Application Mentorship Program, which is a new program that's started by the society to help mentor Africans who are applying for postgraduate degrees at the University of Cambridge to boost the numbers. So essentially, we looked at the admission statistics, and what we found was that Africans, only 2% of the international students at Cambridge, and so this is just one of the initiatives that we are putting together to help address this. So for the program, what we're offering is sort of general guidance throughout the process. And then we're also going to be able to match mentees with current students or alums so that they can provide more tailored and personal feedback on the application process. And then in addition, we're going to also be able to fund a limited number of application fees. And this is thanks to our financial sponsors, which are Newnham College, King's College, and Trinity College. So if you're tuning in, I assume that you have some interest in this. So I would like to encourage you, if you haven't yet, to please apply for the program. And the deadline for this is June 25th. So today we are going to be hearing from a few Africans who are studying or have studied at Cambridge for various postgraduate degrees. They're going to talk about the application process, how it was like for them, and then a bit also of their experience at Cambridge. I'm going to let them introduce themselves. Thank you so much to the four of you for, sparing your time this wonderful afternoon, and you could be doing other things to come and share with us. So why don't we start by introducing yourselves to the audience? You can tell them your name, where you're from, your college, the course you're studying, and just maybe a little bit about what you're researching. So we can start with Charity, and then we'll go to Meron, Kenneth, and then Nafisa, if that's all right. So Charity, you can take the floor.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me to this event. So hi everyone, my name is Charity and I'm from Zimbabwe. I'm a third year PhD student in pharmacology and I'm part of Newnham College and my research is on pain signaling in the gut. Thanks.
Great, can we have Meron?
Hi everyone, good afternoon. My name is Meron. As Cynthia said, I am originally from Ethiopia, but I did undergrad in the US and I just finished my master's at Cambridge actually in development studies. And it's a very interdisciplinary program, so I didn't have a very specific research focus, but it was mostly around political economy of Africa.
Awesome. And then Kenneth?
Hi everyone, thank you for inviting me. I am Kenneth Okwor, Nigerian, doing a PhD in law at Wilson College. And my research is on the design of legal and institutional framework for the West African single currency.
Nice. And lastly, can we hear from Nafisa?
Hello, everyone. My name is Nafisa. I am from Nigeria. I completed my PhD program in the Center of Development Studies, same as Meron. And I completed it almost exactly a year ago. I studied education systems in the Nigerian context. At the moment, I am a research associate in the Department of Land Economy. It's a pleasure to be here.
Nice, awesome. So thank you once again for joining us, all four of you. And I'm glad that we're able to get quite a good representation in terms of nationality and also in terms of, the fields of study. So I'm hopeful that, everyone who's tuning in today will be able to, find some common ground somewhere with everyone that's sharing today. So before we dive into the discussion, just to tell you a little bit about the structure, I'm going to ask sort of 2 or 3 big questions to the panelists, and they're going to answer and share that. And then after that, we'll have a chance for some questions from the audience. So if you have any questions along the way, please put them in the Q&A box so that we can refer to those later. If someone has asked a question that you also have, you can upvote it or respond to that, leave a comment and all of that under the question. Yeah, and then after that, we're going to wrap up. And then for anyone who maybe can't be here, if you know someone who can't be here, we're going to make this recording available on our YouTube channel afterwards as well. Okay, so we're going on to the first question. So this question is about why Cambridge? So how did you come to learn about Cambridge? I mean, obviously, before you came here, you were doing other things, and I've heard people have had different journeys. Some people were working before the postgraduate degrees. Some people were studying before. So could you share about what you were doing before you came to Cambridge, and then how Cambridge landed in your radar? And what that process was like to decide to apply. And when you're speaking about that, I think it would be great to also hear a bit about imposter syndrome, if this applies to you, because another thing that we hear a lot is that, Cambridge is such a prestigious school, and many times a lot of people get discouraged or don't even think about applying to Cambridge. So if this was something that you experienced, it would be nice to also hear about what that was like for you and how you overcame that to put an application in. And then lastly, if you received any sort of help or guidance as well along the way. So this is a bit of a loaded question. So just to recap again, what were you doing before Cambridge? How did you find out about Cambridge? And then come to apply, overcoming any imposter syndrome. And then, if you received any help or guidance on what that was like. So it would be nice to hear from everyone. So why don't we start again with Charity, and then feel free to jump in or add on or respond to things that someone else has said as well. So yeah, Charity, you can start.
So before I came to Cambridge, I was doing undergrad at Arizona State University, and I heard about Cambridge. Actually, I heard about the Gates Scholarship from my scholarship advising office at my school. So then that's how I decided to apply to Cambridge, because I, learned about the scholarship. I thought it was something that I could do. And then I, got a lot of help from the scholarship advising office with my essays and my research proposal. And at the time when I was applying, I really didn't doubt myself. I thought I could do it, but my imposter syndrome kicked in when I got here. So I wasn't really scared when I was applying, but I think it's something that I've had to deal with as I've been progressing in my degree. Did I answer all the questions, I think? Yeah. Okay.
Yes, I think you did. Meron, do you have a response?
Yeah, it's actually very similar to Charity. I also applied because I was interested in the Gates Cambridge scholarship, as someone from my undergrad told me I should apply from the scholarship office. So they were really helpful in helping me craft the application. So because of their support, when I was applying, I didn't feel like I wasn't worthy of applying because I had their trust. But as Charity said, I think the imposter syndrome started kicking in more once I actually started the program and I met my classmates. But I definitely always had to remind myself that we were all selected into the program for a reason, and we were all worth of being there.
Right. That's great. Thank you for sharing them. Yeah, it does sound quite similar. I think the one thing I'd like you to maybe speak more on is the part about the support. So how was that process like? Did you reach out first to the office, or did they reach out first to you? And specifically, in what ways did they help you?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so they reached out first to just tell me more about scholarships that the UK had, the Rhodes and Gates Cambridge, and so because it also serves their university to have students be selected by these scholarships, they were very supportive. For like a couple of months, they were helping me review my essays. They even helped me with interview prep. So they gathered a committee of professors that mock interviewed me. So that was very helpful. In the end, actually, the Gates Cambridge didn't work out, but still just having their support in the application process and helping me craft a personal statement that was read by a bunch of people was really helpful, because once you write an essay yourself, you think it's okay, but having a lot of people read it, and just many people, it's useful, because if you have only one person read it, you only get their side, and it might not, even if they give you a lot of feedback, it might not be the right feedback. So it's worth having a lot of people read your application so that you can get different perspectives and then put them all together.
Right, exactly. And so Charity, was this also a similar thing for you? Were you also getting a lot of feedback on your essays, and did you also have a mock interview as well?
I did. So I was really lucky that I had like a really supportive team of mentors and, you know, the scholarship advising office. But I went through multiple rounds of editing with my essays, which I really recommend. And I also did mock interviews with my undergrad PI and some other advisors at the school. So I think that was really helpful in preparing me for the application and the interview.
Right. Okay, thank you so much, both. So can we hear from Kenneth as well about, I don't know if you need me to remind you of the question.
All right,
Yeah.
I scribbled some things down.
Great.
My experience is quite different from those of Charity and Meron. Before I came to Cambridge, I was practicing law and also teaching law in Nigeria, and I did that before. I can hear myself. Before I decided, okay, it was time to go for graduate studies. And when I was applying, because I didn't come to Cambridge first, I did a master's elsewhere. And that was when I had the imposter syndrome, because I mean, I had the grades to apply to the school I wanted to apply to, but I didn't think I was good enough. And so I decided to apply to schools that were on a lesser tier. I won't mention any names. And so I spoke with my mentor about it. And she said, no, just put in the application. And so I decided I didn't send my application to anybody to read. No one has ever seen an application I've written. Yeah. No one has ever seen an application I've written. And when I'm applying, only very few people, my family members, and at the time, my mentor from the law school knew that I was applying to anything. And then if I'm going to ask you to write me a letter of recommendation, then you will know that I'm applying for something. So I wrote my applications myself. When I write, I keep it cools off for a bit, maybe a week, and then I come back and read it again so that I will see what I actually wrote, not what I think I wrote. Yeah, so that's what I did for all of my applications, from my first master's to my master's here, and then to the PhD. Imposter syndrome before I went for my first master's. There was no imposter syndrome when I was coming to Cambridge for my master's, second master's. When I was applying for the PhD, it was very heavy because the second master's was actually a PhD application that I changed last minute to a master's application because I didn't think I was ready. So I came here and did another master's just to know Cambridge better, know my supervisor better, even though I had been following her work since 2015, and just knowing that this is the person I'd like to supervise my PhD. But I learned she was teaching on the course I wanted to do. So I converted my PhD application to a master's, and then came here and did the master's, and then sent in the application for the PhD. And even though I was here doing the master's and just keeping up what was going on, I remember that period was a difficult period because, I mean, I didn't think my application was good enough. I didn't think I was good enough, but well, we're here now. And yeah, as I've said, I don't think it's the best thing to do, getting help with your applications. But for me, I didn't get any help. I think why that worked for me was because I didn't apply to more than one school at a time. So for every application I've ever written, it's just one school. I focus on it and I apply to the school, and I sink or swim on the basis of the application. And that's probably what has worked for me.
Right. Thank you for being honest and sharing about that. I think maybe I'll ask one more question. There's a question I want to ask. So about the imposter syndrome, like how did you eventually overcome that? Or is this maybe something that you're still dealing with? But I mean, definitely to get to the point where you finally put in that PhD application, you must have passed, through some of it.
The imposter syndrome is something I deal with every day. With every submission I send to my supervisor, I ask myself, what is she going to say? And then the comments come back and the comments are favorable. And I say, was it that good? And even when I finished my first master's, I remember at the graduation, I was sitting there and just reflecting on the past year and the fact that I came here to improve myself and to defeat that imposter syndrome that I had. But sitting there, I think it became worse because, and I remember the post I made on Instagram about graduating and all of that. And my conclusion was that the more I learned, the more I became aware of my own ignorance. So it made things worse in a way. And I feel that, I mean, when I send in work, there's that fear that it's mediocre every time. There's always that fear that it's mediocre. But when the comments come back and they're not as bad as I thought they would be, then I realized, okay, you're probably doing something right. And I have the confidence to write up the next piece of work and send it in and then just go through that process again. But I think after a while, you get used to it, yeah.
Okay, so yeah, it's kind of like a step-by-step, and you just sort of take small steps and celebrate the small wins as you make the progress. And that's really good. It's really good to hear that viewpoint as well. So yeah, thank you for sharing that. Okay, and then last, we're going to hear from Nafisa. So please let me know if you'd like me to repeat the question, otherwise you can go ahead.
Okay, I also took some notes, but please remind me if I forget something. I think listening to Kenneth, I have a lot of similarities with his experience. And I think maybe it's because we both applied for the PhD program, perhaps, as opposed to the master's. Before coming to Cambridge, I was also working. I'd worked for 3 years between my master's and coming back into academia. And I think my interest in coming back to study a PhD had to do with the work that I was doing, which was in the development sphere. And the PhD provided the flexibility and the space to sort of investigate things outside of the professional realm, to shape your research questions and explore as much as you would like. I think I chose Cambridge because a lot of the literature I was reading that pertained to my work, a lot of work was happening on that in Cambridge. And I had my eye on a specific supervisor. So that sort of narrowed my focus in applying to schools for the PhD. I didn't approach it the same way as Kenneth. I applied to at least 3 other schools just to sort of have options if possible. So that was the main reason why I applied. I think I was confident in the application. The imposter syndrome didn't kick in at that point. But when I arrived in Cambridge and it's all new and your research is taking shape and it changes, it's not quite what you expected, it adjusts and you learn more and realize that your ideas and assumptions were just wrong. So everything changed. Yeah. That has a way of, your confidence, your ego actually takes a hit. So you have to regroup. And I think, well, for me anyway, I didn't want to talk about it or share it, but it turns out that many people are dealing with the same thing. And they can be very receptive if you're willing to open up a bit and recognize that it's actually normal. You're going through a process and you want to come out at the end of it with something, so you're growing. And it takes a lot out of you. I think the PhD in particular, I know the master's is an intense program, but for the PhD, it's a longer journey and it's a bit more isolated because it's your own research project. A good supervisor makes all the difference when you're applying. I think that should be high on your criteria when you're applying. Just find a person who you can work with, who you've talked to, who understands your research, because it will probably change as you begin and by the time you get to the end. But also, there are also services that you can rely on when you arrive. So I utilize the counseling services the university offers, because even now, as a research associate, as a postdoc, I still feel that sometimes. So you can reach out to people, and the African society made a difference for me. It's a very strong community, and the people are very supportive. I think I might have hit all the points, I'm not sure, but if I missed something.
Yeah, I think it. Yeah. No, yeah, you did. Excellent. Thank you so much for all four of you for sharing about that. So yeah, I mean, I hope, we can all learn now that everyone's coming from a different place, and, everyone is here at Cambridge, different backgrounds, different stories, different methods of applying. So I hope you can see now that there isn't really like a perfect, Cambridge candidate or Cambridge person. And there also isn't really a perfect way to apply. They're just different ways of navigating this. And at the end of the day, it's all about learning, right? So yeah, I think also one thing I'm hearing is like, just sort of staying humble, intellectually and being open to learning and growing from that as well. So I think we are going to move on to the next question. But just quickly, I noticed that someone had mentioned that they couldn't really hear the audio, and I just want to make sure that the sound is clear with everyone. I mean, other panelists, I think I could hear everyone pretty okay. Yeah, and just a reminder to people, if you have any questions for the panelists, please remember to put them in the Q&A so that we can take them in a few minutes later. So the next question now is about funding. So this is a big one. I think for many people, it's all right to aspire to Cambridge, but then without that funding, that dream can't really be realized. And this is true for many of us, myself included, right? And I think everyone here is on or was on some sort of funding for their studies. So could you share a bit about your funding body, and then how you came about that? So how you applied, because again, they're different scholarships and they have different processes. I've heard some you need you to apply externally, for some they do interviews and all of that. So could you talk about so that I guess the audience can also know sort of the specifics of those things? And then this other question is, you don't need to be modest for this one. So like, what do you think was special about your application, or what do you think made you stood out that then got you, that funding approval as well? So could we start this time with Meron? And then we'll go from there.
So as I mentioned at the beginning, when I applied to Cambridge, I was applying towards a specific scholarship. That's the strategy I've used in the past as well. I always try to apply for schools that I know have scholarships available, because I know that if I just apply and I get in, then it's not worth it. Cambridge, and I just applied in through the normal application process where you have to select. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah.
Okay, I think we're maybe losing you a bit now. Is it just me?
Okay. Can you hear me now? Sorry, I don't think my internet is working well.
Okay, I think I can hear you now. Yes.
Okay, I'll try to keep my camera on when I speak, because my internet is not very strong. But so what I was saying is that and I ticked all the boxes for the funding that I was eligible for when I was applying. And I applied, and I applied for Gates Cambridge as well. I interviewed for that, but I wasn't awarded that. So in April of last year, once I knew that most of the funding had been allocated, I thought that I wasn't going to come to Cambridge because I hadn't received any scholarships yet. So I waited for a few more months, and then just a bit, fortunately, serendipitously, I was awarded a scholarship at the end of August. And that scholarship is a scholarship from my department specifically, so the Center for Development Studies, and it's dedicated for students that come from African countries, and it's a full scholarship. So it worked out really well, but I didn't do any interviews or additional applications for that. I think it's just part of the normal funding application process that you submit, and then they just were able to see where that I was an Ethiopian citizen, and so they granted me that scholarship. And in regards to your other question about what I think made me stand out or allowed me to get the scholarship and just to get into the program in general. I think there was a strong connection between my extracurricular and leadership work that I had done in undergrad and my academic background in undergrad as well. I was an anthropology major and I did research on albinism, and I did a project on albinism as well. And I tied that, and I mentioned that I wanted to explore that further in the program, in the development studies program. And so I think that made me stand out a bit.
Excellent. Thank you for sharing. Nafisa, can we hear from you?
Sure. My journey was a bit more winding because I wasn't able to secure funding when I began my program, which is a risky thing to do. I wouldn't necessarily advise anyone to begin a program if you haven't secured funding yet, because it adds another dimension to your stresses of studying. But I only managed to secure funding halfway through. So I had to self-fund for the first half of my program. And during that time, I was actively looking for money throughout the process. I eventually was able to get a scholarship from the Commonwealth. So there are multiple ways you can do this. You can either apply directly via the university, or you can apply via your home country. So I was successful via my home country application. And then I also got money from the Cambridge Trust. But one thing is, when you are in the system, other opportunities to get funding open up even as some close. So it's an added stress, but there are many paths to do this. It just depends on what you are willing to do and what risks you want to take. But yeah, it was an arduous process. But there are different pots of money, and sometimes you have to go multiple. So it was a full scholarship when I got it. But when your program overruns, or if it takes longer than you anticipate, you still have to go looking for money again. And there are many other pots of money around that you can apply to. But it's a lot of work, and it might not be worth it for many people.
Right. Okay, great. So can we hear from Charity about your funding process?
Okay. So initially, as I mentioned before, like when I was applying to Cambridge, it was mostly because of the GATE scholarship. So I was intentional about applying for that. So I put together, a strong application for that, and a good recommendation letter just specific for the GATEs. And then I indicated in my application that I was also open to like other funding from other, Cambridge organizations. So luckily I got a Cambridge Trust scholarship before I got the GATE scholarship. So that was really nice. So I knew there that I was going to come to Cambridge either way. And then I interviewed for GATE and I got that as well. So that was also, I'm really thankful for that. So, I'm still funded by GATE, and they've been really helpful and supportive. And every year the GATE scholarship is still running. So I really recommend applying for it. Just take a chance and do it. It's possible to get it. And then in terms of what made my application good, I think I had really good recommendation letters, and I think I was prepared for the PhD, or I thought at the time. I had, good experience that made me suitable for what I wanted to do. And then I had good grades, and I was involved in the community, which is like mostly what, the funding body that I'm a part of was looking for. Yeah. I also had good essays. I think I got a lot of helps, which I recommend. So yeah, I just put together a strong application. So yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you. And Kenneth, can we also hear about your process?
Yeah, listening to Meron and Charity, I think I now know why my GATE applications never sailed through. So when I came for the master's, I applied to GATE and Trust and a few other scholarships, and I didn't get any. And I guess it's because I thought I could do it myself and just write the applications myself, because I wrote the applications myself and all of that. And so when none of them came through, I had a pending scholarship from my state government back home. So I sent a letter to the Attorney General saying, no, that money you promised me some time ago, I'm ready to collect. and they were happy to accommodate me and invited me over and said I should go and the money would come. Well, the money is still coming as we speak. So I ultimately had to self-fund for my master's. Yeah, and it wasn't funny, just to summarize. And so when I applied to the PhD, I also did the same thing, just write the applications myself, write the essays myself, speak to not necessarily the people who could give me the best recommendations, but the people who could just, I'm applying for something, keep it to yourself, just write the recommendation and let's move on from there. And yeah, so I applied to the PhD. I think Gates was the first one to tell me nope for the second time. Then I didn't hear back from the trust for a while. And then I got an email from someone at the trust telling me to apply to a very specific scholarship, the Rowan Williams Scholarship. Just said, Kenneth, I've looked at your profile. I think you would be very qualified for this. And I said, okay. And I think that email came maybe 5 days to the deadline for the Rowan Williams Scholarship. And I didn't know about it because it was a new scholarship at the time. This is the second year running for the scholarship. And so I looked at it, nice. I was going to benefit from the fragility, conflict, and violence in Nigeria because the scholarship is for people who went to school in an environment of conflict. And I schooled in Jos in Nigeria. So for a while, I had to run for my life a few times. So put those in the application. And I got it. Thankfully, it's a full scholarship. And it's quite generous, so yeah. And then when I came in, I had applied to Wolfson College for a scholarship when I was doing the master's, because obviously when I had to self-fund, when my state government started speaking the English, they know how to speak best. I applied to Wolfson College and I didn't hear back from them throughout the master's. And I think in Lent term, during the PhD, I got a letter from Wolfson College saying, your application for a scholarship over a year ago has been approved and whatnot. And I sent a letter back saying, I responded saying, okay, guys, I'm doing a PhD now. That was for the master's. I have a scholarship now. And they said, oh, that's fine. We'll speak to your funding body. And then they spoke to the trust. And then the next night, I got another letter saying that Wolfson College is now part funding my scholarship. So it's now Rowan Williams and Wolfson College. So the message there, or the lesson there is there's funding in the college, right? And there are lots of scholarships that you probably wouldn't have heard of. And so just doing your research is key, because the scholarship I'm enjoying now, I didn't know about it. And but for that email, I definitely would not have applied to it. So there are lots of scholarships out there. Do your research, speak to people, maybe just even send an email to someone at the trust asking them to look at your profile and probably suggest or recommend scholarships that you may be eligible for. And then also looking at colleges, because colleges have pools of money that they are happy to give out to deserving candidates when the time comes. Yeah. And then for what made my application for the scholarship stand out? Nothing, just that I grew up in Jos. that's what made my application stand out. Yeah, I grew up in Jos at the time when the Jos crisis was in vogue. Escaped a few bombs and lost a few friends. Yeah, that's what made me stand out.
Oh, that is very deep. But okay, thank you so much for sharing. I think once again we have very different answers. You know, some people actually started their studies self-funding and then were later on able to get a scholarship, while some people, you know, had scholarships from the beginning. And again, the process is very different. Like Kenneth has summarized, you can get funding from departments, you can get funding from college, you can get external funding, or, you know, internal funding from the trust. So there's so many avenues. And actually, I think there's still new scholarships that are opening up. I think there's quite a few that, you know, started this year as well. So definitely keep your eye out, for scholarships. So someone was asking, what is the name of the scholarship that Kenneth mentioned? So that's the
Rowan
Rowan
Williams,
Williams
yeah.
scholarship.
Rowan Williams,
Right?
Cambridge.
Yes, yes, the
Yeah.
Rowan Williams scholarship. So you can go to the Cambridge Trust website. So I think if you Google Cambridge Trust, you should be able to find a link. And I think there's somewhere there where you can search all the scholarship listings, and you can actually filter by the course and the nationality, and then it shows you, all the scholarships that someone with that profile is eligible for. So you can start having a look at those to see what you're eligible for, and to see which ones may need like some additional application, maybe some extra essays or anything like that. So yeah, definitely keep an eye out for that. So I think there was a question that came in before this webinar actually. So that came from Peter, who sent an email asking about scholarships, and I hope that you've had your questions answered. So I'm just going to quickly check. So the first question was if there are other scholarships besides external scholarships. So yes, there are some from the Cambridge Trust. And if the application process is different, for many of them, no, you just need to tick a box that says, consider me for any scholarships I'm eligible for, but for some of them, yes. So you need to check the Cambridge Trust website to find the ones that you need to apply for with some sort of extra effort. And then he also asked if it's available to all programs. Scholarships are available to most programs, but some can be picky. I know, for instance, that MBA programs don't tend to be funded. So you can just make sure you double check that your program is part of the programs that will be funded. So I hope those have answered your questions. And then I'm hoping that we can also take a few questions that have come in as well. So I'll just maybe pop them to one of you to answer. So someone here is asking, Peter, is asking, in the USA, it is permitted to pursue a PhD program from a bachelor's. Can this be done in the UK? So I guess Charity or Meron, you could take that question.
Sorry, is it asking if it's permitted in the UK or in the US?
If it's permitted in the UK to pursue a PhD from a bachelor's.
Oh yeah, I came from my bachelor's. I don't have a master's degree and I'm doing a PhD, so it is permitted. I probably depends by school and program, but in the life sciences, it's definitely doable.
Yes, yeah. Yes, Kenneth, looks like you have something to say.
If you're a lawyer, you better get the master's. Yeah, because
Okay.
it's very difficult to move from undergraduate law to PhD law without proving that you can do graduate research.
Right. Okay, so I think the response here is it sort of depends on your program. So for the life sciences, it is possible. So I also came to my PhD from a bachelor's without having to do a master's, and I am in the life sciences. I think it's more important to just show that you've had that experience of research, so probably through internships and that kind of stuff. But then if your program is sort of more restrictive, so to say, like for law, then yeah, you may need to do that master's.
I should add that even for law, even if you have a master's, if your master's did not have a thesis or dissertation component, it may not qualify you for a PhD in many schools. So doing a master's, because I've had people speak to me about masters where they had just coursework and exams and they didn't write anything. And it's been difficult for them getting PhD admissions.
Okay, that's good to note as well. Okay. Okay, so we have someone here asking about funding postgraduate studies. So is it possible to fully pay for postgraduate studies with jobs such as assistant studentships and research assistants without being physically strained? That is, if a scholarship is not gotten. So Nafisa, would you like to take this question, please?
I think it depends. Is the question pertaining to you begin your program and then you work to supplement? Or is this about fully funding the program? Just like
yes, I believe.
Okay.
I believe they're asking to fully fund the program by doing extra work.
Okay, I think when I was studying, there were restrictions on my visa. So you're only allowed to work a certain amount of hours per week. And that limits the amount of money you can earn. Having said that, you can supplement your living by working, but I don't think you will be able to earn enough to cover tuition, for instance, for an international student. Yeah, yeah. Depends on the job, of course. You might be working in where they pay a ton of money. But it's really tricky because the hours you probably would need to put in would exceed your allowance on your visa. And you also have to do your studies. So I think it's probably important to have secured your funding, at least for your tuition before you come in. And then the mental money that comes in from working can support you.
Right. Yeah, thank you for that response. I think I would agree. It's quite I think that's an impossible task, really, to be expecting to raise all of your funding from working 20 hours. I don't think that's possible because I think the tuition and the maintenance combined comes out to something like £40,000 per year. I mean, I don't think that's really, even people who are working research assistant jobs do not make that much a year. So yeah, I think definitely having some sort of security about the funding would be good. You could work, but I don't think it's certainly going to be enough to raise all the money that's needed for the studies. Okay, so there is another question about English language requirements. Actually, that's something we didn't talk about. So I don't know if anyone here can be able to respond to this. So the person is saying they took the IELTS test and they're required to get a 7, but then they had 6.5 in the speaking section. So how would this affect their application? Does anyone know?
Okay, I would just share a friend's experience because she was also making an application. If your other scores on the IELTS are meeting the requirements. So this person got a 6.5, did you say? And the requirement is a 7? Mm-hmm. Okay. Mm-hmm. If the other scores are higher than the 7, it is possible to ask for a remark, for them to remark the speaking section. I assume it's recorded. Sorry, I don't know the details. But if you do that, it's possible that you might be bumped up to a 7. And that happened for my friend anyway. So her scores had to be adjusted because it turns out with further consideration, her scores were higher. So I think gauge it based on what your other scores are. And if those are fairly high, then it might be worth doing that as opposed to resitting the entire thing again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think to add on to that as well, I think for the English language requirements, I don't think that's really taken into consideration in terms of giving you the admission. Like, so for instance, you don't have to submit your test scores to sort of submit your application. So you can actually get an offer and then that offer is conditional until you submit your test scores. So to speak, I want to say that it doesn't sort of have such a heavy impact on your application. So you can actually apply without having taken the test yet, right? So just to answer that question of how does that affect my application, but like Nafisa said, there are some things that you could do if you were nervous about it. You could actually email the language office to check if the score was okay, and then you could try seeing if you can get a remark. I think the language office, they also offer a limited number of free tests. So Cambridge accepts different tests, and one of them is the in-house language test that they offer for free. I'm not very sure how you can get this, but again, it might be worth emailing if maybe you've had a conditional offer and finance is a problem and you can't pay for another test. You can see about negotiating that as well. So I think Kenneth has a question or a response.
No, not a question, just to second what you said. I applied without taking the English test. In the application, I told them to waive it because I didn't think I should take an English test. And they gave me an offer, and it was conditioned on the submission of my English test result. And I tried to fight it for a while. right? I mean, I'm a lawyer, and if I don't fight for myself, who would I fight for? So I tried to fight it for a while. And towards the end of August, I think first week of September, they told me, look, if you don't send us your English language result, we would have to revoke the offer. And that was when I realized, okay, I have to take the test, and I took it and sent it in. So it will not, definitely not affect your chances of getting admitted. You will definitely get admitted if your application is strong enough. And then they will send you an offer conditioned on the submission of your English language test result. Then maybe you can decide to fight it like I did. You may be successful, yeah, where I was not. But ultimately, you may need to take the test.
Right. Right. Okay. So there's another question about, I think we kind of answered this one. What are the work laws like in the UK, especially for Masters International students? So there's a restriction on the visa, on the TEFL visa. You can only work up to maximum of 20 hours a week. So yeah, that's the main restriction. The Cambridge might have additional restrictions, because I think there are some programs, for instance, like the Masters, some master's programs where they don't allow you to work during the term. So you're not allowed to work during term, so you can only work during the vacation time. So just, double check that. But I think ultimately make sure you respect the visa law, you don't want to get into any trouble with that. So definitely no more than 20 hours a week. And then the last question that I'd like to put to the panelists from the Q&A is, someone is asking the criteria for assessing the personal statement. So yeah, what do you think that the admissions people look out for when reading the essays?
I can go.
Yep.
Again, I think it depends on the program that you're applying for. It's all very relative to what you're studying, but for example, for development studies, or I guess like social sciences and humanities in general, for a master's level, I think like making an emphasis to try to tie together what you have done in the past in the undergrad level and professionally as well, if you've worked, and then what you want to do at Cambridge within the program by emphasizing who you want to study with, even in the departments, to show that you have done research and you really, really like this department above all the other ones that universities in the UK and abroad can offer. And then also tie that to what you want to do after. So I know it sounds a lot, but that's why I think really reading it and revising it often and starting the essay writing process weeks, if not months in advance, I think that really helps, because in the end, it will really be worth it.
Right. Would anybody like to add on to that? Yeah, so I think those are the main things. In summary, like make sure you're answering the question, why the course you're studying, how does that tie in with your future plans, and then also why Cambridge. Make sure that your essay is sort of showing that some way. Okay, so I have maybe two more questions actually, as we're wrapping up. So the next one is about the Cambridge experience. So because now you've sailed through the admissions, and then you also found funding, some way, somehow, and you're at Cambridge. So how is or was, that Cambridge experience, as a postgraduate student, and also considering, the hype with such a prestigious school, everybody knows Cambridge, did Cambridge live up to that hype for you? And then, the support, the resources that you were able to access, like, how was this experience like for someone who maybe has not experienced Cambridge or who hasn't been here before? Let's see. So let's start with Kenneth.
Well, I would say that I frankly just came in to do my work and leave, right? So I haven't really been bothered about immersing myself in the wider university community. And so I can't probably speak to that, but I have immersed myself within a few networks here in Cambridge, and I would say that they have been very helpful and very beneficial. For me, I can speak mostly about the academic experience from my master's up till now. For what Cambridge wants to offer, which is, at least in my field, a proper doctrinal examination of the issues, right? An understanding of the underlying theoretical basis for whatever you're doing. Unlike the focus when I was in the US, which is market-based, practical. I think that if you're someone who wants that kind of doctrinal exposure to the issues you're dealing with, then Cambridge will definitely give you what you want. My supervisor has been amazing. Maybe it's because I've started following her work since 2015 when I went to law school. And she's been very supportive. And for a PhD student, your supervisor is almost the most important resource it's the most important resource you have really at the university. And so if your supervisor is not very good, your Cambridge experience will be horrible. And my supervisor has been amazing. So to that extent, my Cambridge experience academically has been amazing. And then socially, I mean, networks I've found here, the African Society, in college, the faculty have been very helpful, just making you feel at home, because the research process can be very lonely. So just having these networks of people that you can speak to, chat to, and relate with has been very helpful. And then the town is nice, it's very picturesque. You can walk around, you can cycle, you can punt. And all of these things just help you to enjoy being here. So overall, I would say that I've had a good experience so far, except maybe during lockdown. I've had a good experience. The one thing I'm not happy about, really, because I mean, we can all say nice things, but I'm going to be honest about this. There's the residency requirement that literally ties you down here for 9 academic terms. I don't know why I should be tied down to this town as a PhD student, but I'm here and my supervisor takes that very seriously. So I can't leave, and I'm not very happy about I'm not very, very happy about that. So that probably is the one dent in the almost sparkling image that Cambridge has so far. Yeah.
Right. Although I do think that some people are able to do field work. I mean, I'm a scientist, I also have to be here, but I do know that there are people who get to travel as part of their PhD doing field work as well. Maybe Nafisa, you did some of that?
Yes. So for my program, I had about a year worth of field work. And for that, you have to formally apply to be away. And then that is approved. Otherwise, you do have to meet the residency requirements that Kenneth explained.
Right. And then about your experience while you were, a postgraduate student, how was that like in terms of support and the resources?
Yeah, I think I had a very positive experience. It was difficult halfway through just because sometimes the nature of the work, it changes. But as Kenneth said, your supervisor is probably the most important person for you when you're doing this kind of research. And I had a lot of academic support throughout the process. So overall, it was a positive one, even as it was difficult. I think I also had a bit of, I had more of a social engagement, I think, than Kenneth did. I was very involved with the African Society, and it helped me. I was also involved with the Black Cantabs, which is another society, and also other sporting activities, which Cambridge is good for. So overall, it was really, really good.
Thanks. Excellent. And then Meron, would you also like to share about, you've only been here for a couple of months, right? But yeah, how, especially during a pandemic, I think it'd be great to also hear how your experience has been like.
Yeah, I hope my experience will not apply to other students in the coming years. Just because it was on Zoom, the rest was everything else was good. I think because it was on Zoom, my academic experience wasn't too exciting, just because it's really hard to do classes on Zoom and never meet your professors, never get to just engage in conversations on a more natural way. But outside of that, I had a wonderful experience socially. A lot of my friends were course mates with mine, so that I met through the course, and we're all in Cambridge. I was in Wolfson College, and others were in other colleges. So I definitely had a wonderful time from that side. But I hope Zoom will not be a big thing in the next years. So I hope that experience doesn't replicate. But other than that, I really had a good time.
Yes, yes. I mean, it's good to hear that despite everything, it was still a good experience. Um, and then Charity.
So I think at the beginning of my PhD, I struggled a lot with imposter syndrome. I mean, I utilized counseling services to get help. And at the beginning, I really felt out of place. As much as I thought I was prepared to be here, it was quite different from what I imagined. And, there was like 2 Black people in my department, there were not a lot of Africans around. So it just was a bit, lonely. And, the fact that, we didn't have to take classes. So it was difficult for me to make friends because all I ever did was just go to the lab and come back. So the people that I interacted with were just people in my lab. And even then I felt like I was just out of place. So that was just like a really, I think, tough thing to deal with because I just felt really isolated. But I definitely recommend engaging with societies. For me, the African Society was quite helpful. I got to meet other Africans there and I made friends there. I did a bit with my college, but I just really, stuck mostly to Africans because it's just easier to be with people, who look like you and understand your journey. So I think that was the main thing. Yeah, I don't know if I missed anything else. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's it. Thank you so much. I think what I've heard is that there are resources out there at Cambridge. There are many ways to engage, whether academic-wise or social-wise. But you do have to be proactive about, finding those resources, be it counseling or be it a society or a group or anything. You do have to be proactive about reaching out to get into those networks because Cambridge is quite big, but these things do exist. So great to hear, great to hear. We have a few more questions that just come in. So it'll be great if we can take these and then we will wrap up. Someone is asking, Francis is asking that he's just finished his master's degree from the US. Is he supposed to take the English language test also? So Kenneth, can you respond to this one?
As I said, I finished a master's. I was finishing a master's in the US when the offer came with the English language condition. And I sent them an email saying, look, Susan, I understand you have a problem when you come from Nigeria directly, but I'm not coming from Nigeria directly, right? And she said, no, you have to take it. And we had that back and forth. And after a while, I realized I had to take it or my admission was going to be revoked. So I'm guessing that if you had your undergrad on the continent, and then you go to the US for a 10, 11-month master's, if you're going to take it, do the course I did, the chances are that you would probably be asked to take the test.
To take it.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, so I think you do need to have studied for maybe, I think, 3 or 4 years or so to be able to get that exemption. I think this is a topic of great debates. We all get fired up every time when we talk about it, but just unfortunately, that's just how things are. But we do hope that this will change at some point in the future. Okay, so someone is asking, how can I apply for an application fee waiver? So does anyone want to take this question or I can take it? Okay, I can take it. So the application fee waivers, I think there's certain category of nationalities that are afforded this. And when you put in your information on portal, you fill in your nationality. So it's kind of automatic. And I think these are low middle income countries and some other countries on some lists. You can find this webpage that has this information. I'm almost sure that Ghana is not on that list, unfortunately. So yeah, if that's the case, you'd have to find other ways to get application fees, perhaps from, your networks around you, maybe your current institution or colleagues. But then, as I said earlier, this mentorship program that we're doing at the society, we're able to provide a limited number of fee waivers as well. So this is a resource that you can also tap into for that. And then there's a question here about the equality, diversity, and inclusion at colleges. So are colleges inclusive environments, or is change needed? If so, in what way? Charity, would you like to take this question?
Well, I mean, like I said, I don't really do much with my college, but we supposedly have an international MCR officer, and they try and, like, you know, do international events. But, you know, I think at the college level, I haven't really seen that much diversity, to be honest. So I can't speak on that, sorry.
Okay, does anyone want to add to that?
Yes, I can, because for two reasons. One, I'm at Wilson College, and Wilson tries to be inclusive. Emphasis on the word tries. Whether it succeeds or not is a different question. And secondly, because I was part of the MCR, GCR, yeah. And I know that there were some things that were put in place to try to include as many people as possible. For instance, in addition to an international rep, there were specific events for international students. There was a specific BOP for Africans, the Afro BOP. The college has an equality hub that tries to bring people together to talk about inclusion and related issues in the college. And then increasingly, because one of the things I noticed, while the college tried to be inclusive with the student body, I noticed that the governing body wasn't as such. It was very white. But the president of the college has been trying to change that. So I think I've noticed that in the past year, particularly through the lockdown, a lot of the fellowships they awarded went to people of color, Black people specifically. And I think that's pretty impressive, just seeing that they are aware that things need to change and they're taking steps to change that. A lot of work still needs to be done across the university because we still hear stories. But yeah, some colleges are trying to make efforts to remedy the situation.
Yeah, I think so too. I think over the past year, there's just been a lot of conversation about equality, diversity, and inclusion. I think a lot of people are taking it seriously, and I've seen a lot of initiatives spring up as well. Yes. So we're going to wrap up very soon. For any more questions, let's see, you can email the ASCO Society to ask your questions, and we'll try to respond to those. And then again, you know, you're encouraged to apply for the mentorship program where we can answer all of these questions, and we have all the time in the world for those. So as we wrap up now, just like for each of you to share with the audience, you know, just a few words. What is your advice for Africans who are aspiring to attend Cambridge? I mean, maybe even for people who are not yet aspiring, who perhaps are still in that imposter syndrome phase and need to get past that. So what advice would you give to Africans applying to Cambridge? So can we start with Meron?
Yeah, I would say don't be intimidated by the application process or by the fact that it might seem like a daunting and very competitive process. If you don't try, you'll never know. And I remember I was telling a friend actually this week, I remember I was feeling like so exhausted by the end of like some revising the essays. And at the end, I didn't want to do a final revision. And I was like, I don't even want to apply anymore. It's not worth editing this essay again. But if I hadn't applied, I wouldn't be talking to you all now. So just try. And you know, and if it doesn't work out, it's not a reflection of your work or your worthiness. It's a very competitive process. So even the fact that you tried is a big accomplishment.
Yes, thank you, Meron. Nafisa, would you like to share?
Yeah, I think I will echo exactly what Meron said. You have nothing to lose by trying. especially if, okay, I'll say this particularly for people who want to come in for a PhD. I think it's very important to identify and secure the right program and supervisor, because it will shape your entire experience of the program. So that is a practical and pragmatic thing to have at the back of your mind when you're applying. I think it's very worthwhile. Charity mentioned there aren't that many Africans, and that's true, but it's surprisingly Pan-African. And there's a very strong community there. It's a strong network, I found. And it takes you into new networks that you might not have been part of before, academically as well as socially, and just your own personal growth and development. So I think it's worthwhile. Apply. There's nothing to lose by trying. And if you don't get in the first time and you want to come in and you really think this is the space for you to do your research, try again. You might not get it the first time, but the second time you might.
Right. Thank you for that encouragement, Nafisa. Kenneth, would you like to share your advice?
I think I'll start by re-echoing what Meron and Nafisa have said. And then to add to that, start early. Start the process early. It will give you enough time to write a good application, to give you enough time to review the application. If you're someone like myself who would want your application to cool down for a week or two before you go back to it, then you need a lot of time. And if you want to send your application to people to review, you would also have to give them time to review the application. So starting early is very important. And don't be scared, write it and send it in. One of two things would happen. It would be a yes or a no. If it's a no, you try again. If it's a yes, congratulations. So that's it.
Right. Thank you, Kenneth. Lastly, Charity, what words do you have to share?
I definitely want to agree with my fellow panelists on what they've said. Start an application early, get as much help as you can get from people. Don't be afraid to apply. You can definitely get in. We're here, so it's possible for anybody. And yeah, good luck.
Yeah, thank you so much. So yes, we have come to the end of the webinar. So thank you once again to Kenneth, Nafisa, Meron, and Charity for sparing your time this afternoon to share with us about your journey to applying to Cambridge and being at Cambridge. I think it's been really great to hear all of your stories and hear, such variety in your stories, and you're all here at Cambridge studying and also be inspired as well for those who are aspiring to be here. I hope that people have been able to learn, many things that you didn't know before. So once again, this video will be put on our YouTube channel. So if you want to refer to it in the future, please do so. The link to learn more about the application mentorship program and apply for it is in the chat. So we're providing support for your application process to Cambridge, and we can provide some application fee awards as well. And then lastly, I know we couldn't get through some of the burning questions, but if you still have those, please send them to ask@kusuru.cam.ac.uk. So once again, thank you so much everyone for tuning in, and have a lovely rest of your afternoon and weekend. All right. Bye-bye. Thank you so much all.